Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Shockley, and today we're going to be starting a new Magic Treehouse book. This is book number 11 called Lions at Lunchtime. And this is going to be our last book that we read for this year. But I do want to tell you that if you really love the Annie and Jack books, there are so many more to this series. So if you just want to pick up where we left off after the school year's over, you want to go to the library or a bookstore and you want to find book number 12. So because this is the last book, I want you to really focus on all of the things that we've learned this year that good readers do. Good readers make predictions. Good readers stop and think about what they've read. They think about how what they're reading relates to other books that they've read. They also sometimes put themselves in a character's shoes and say how a character is feeling and why they're feeling that way. So as we read this book and as you continue to read over the summer, I want you to always really get into a book and take your time with it, okay? It's not a rush. It's not a race. It's supposed to be fun, and you're supposed to learn something or listen to a new great story. So each day this week, we're going to be listening to 2 chapters a day, just because we're running out of time, and I want to make sure that you hear the whole book, what happens at the beginning, the middle, and the end. So today we are going to be reading chapters 1 and 2, which chapter 1 is called Before Lunch. So that's where I'm going to start. Before Lunch, that's the name of this chapter, chapter 1. Jack and Annie were walking home from the grocery store. Jack's pack was heavy. It held a big jar of peanut butter and a loaf of bread. "Are you going to have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?" said Annie. "Or a peanut butter and honey sandwich?" Jack started to answer, but stopped. "Oh, man," he whispered. "What is it?" said Annie. "Look at that," said Jack. And I want to show you this picture, so if I could do it well. This is what Jack just saw. And if you did your background building last week, you may know what animal that is from the safari. He pointed to the edge of the Frog Creek woods. In the shadows stood a small, delicate animal. It looked like a tiny deer. "It's a sign," whispered Annie. "Remember when we saw the rabbit? He was a sign of the Wild West." The deer-like creature leaped into the woods. Jack and Annie didn't stop to think. They followed as fast as they could. Jack's heavy pack thumped against his back as he ran. Finally, they stopped and looked around. "Where did she go?" he said. "I don't see her," said Annie. "Oh, wow," said Annie and pointed up. There was the magic treehouse. It was shining in the noon sun. At the top of the tallest tree in the woods, its rope ladder swayed in the shadows below. "Where's Morgan?" said Annie. Morgan Le Fay wasn't waving at them from the window. She wasn't even at the window. "I don't know. Let's go up," said Jack. They climbed the ladder and went into the treehouse. Sunlight streamed through the window. It lit a stack of books and 2 scrolls in the corner. The ancient scrolls held the answers to the riddles that Jack and Annie had solved earlier. Jack took off his heavy pack. "Did Morgan leave us a 3rd riddle?" said Annie. "Looking for someone?" said a soft voice. Jack and Annie whirled around. What does that mean, they whirled around? If you said that means they turned around quickly, then you're right. "Morgan!" said Annie. Morgan Le Fay had appeared out of nowhere. She looked ancient and lovely in the bright light. "Do you still want to become master librarians?" she asked Jack and Annie. "So you can help me in my work?" "Yes," they said together. "Wonderful," Morgan said. Then she reached into her robe and pulled out a scroll. "You've solved 2 riddles so far," she said. "Here is your 3rd. She handed the scroll to Annie. And for your research, she pulled out a book from her robe and handed it to Jack. The book's cover said, The Plains of Africa. So there's Morgan. She's giving them the book, and Annie has the new scroll with the new riddle. Africa, said Jack. Oh man, I've always wanted to go there. He opened the book. He and Annie stared at the picture. It showed hordes of zebras, tall giraffes, big animals with horns, and tiny, deer-like creatures. Hey, that's the animal that led us here, said Annie. A Thompson's gazelle, I believe, Morgan said. Where are the lions, said Jack. You'll find out, said Morgan. Maybe we need to plan this trip, said Jack. Morgan smiled. No, go ahead. Make your wish now. Annie pointed at the picture. I wish we could go there, she said. Be careful, said Morgan. Just keep an eye out. For what? Said Jack. The lions, of course, she said. Wait, said Jack. Too late. The wind had started to blow. The treehouse had started to spin. Jack squeezed his eyes shut. The treehouse spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. I don't think my dogs like that the treehouse is taking off. Wiz, come here. Okay. They're on their way to Africa. So let's keep going to read chapter 2. Now this chapter is called Jump, Beasts, Jump. As a reader, I might want to make a prediction about what beasts they're talking about if they're in Africa. And what beasts would they want to jump? Excuse me. I'm kind of thinking it might be a lion. But you can make a different prediction. Alright, is that your prediction? I'm going to start reading. Bright light flooded the treehouse again. A rustling sound came from outside the window. Annie peeked out and laughed. Hey there, she said. Jack looked out too. A giraffe was eating leaves off the tree. It had a sweet, goofy face. Jack peered at the world beyond the giraffe. He couldn't believe his eyes. He saw a huge grassy plain, a wide river, and tons of birds and animals. More than he had ever imagined in one place. So here's what Jack and Annie are experiencing as soon as they get to Africa. A little giraffe, them in the treehouse. Giraffes and zebras were on the side of the river where Jack and Annie were. Thompson's gazelles and the big horned animals were on the other side. Where are the lions? Said Jack. I don't know, said Annie. Do you think it's always this crowded? Let's find out, said Jack. He picked up the book on Africa and looked at the picture of the animals. He read aloud. Every year in late spring, thousands of zebras and gazelles and millions of wildebeests migrate from the dry plains to Tanzania to Kenya. What's migrate mean? Said Annie. Good science vocabulary word. Let's take a pause there. Does anybody know what migrate means? If you do, say it right now. All right, here's the answer. Jack pushed his glasses into place. It means they go someplace else for part of the year, like birds go south for the winter. Oh, right, said Annie. Jack turned the page to read more. Before they are safe in Kenya, the animals must first cross the Mara River. Zebras go first, then the wildebeest. The tiny gazelles swim last. Oh, said Annie in a sad voice. What's wrong? Said Jack. Poor beasts. She looked out the window. They seem afraid. On the far side of the river, the horned animals were standing at the edge of the steep bank of the river. They stared down nervously at the rushing water. "Jump, beast, jump!" Annie shouted. Ah, that sounds familiar. That's the name of our chapter. So Annie was talking to the wildebeests, trying to tell them to jump into the water. "Don't be silly. They can't hear you," said Jack. He studied the broad plain. I wonder where the lions are," he said. "I don't know, but I have to go," Annie said. "Go where?" said Jack. "To the river to help them," she said. "Help who?" said Jack. "Those wild beasts on the other side," said Annie. "I have to help them migrate." "Are you nuts?" said Jack. Annie handed Jack the scroll and started out of the treehouse. "Wait a second," said Jack. "We haven't even read Morgan's riddle yet." Annie stopped on the ladder. "Read it now," she said. Jack unrolled the ancient scroll and read aloud. "I'm the color of gold and as sweet as can be, but beware of the danger that's all around me. What am I?" Annie started down again. "Annie!" "We'll look for the answer in a minute," said Annie. "What are you doing?" Jack called. But there was no stopping her. Jack watched as she hopped off the ladder. Then she started to walk through the tall grass, between the zebras and giraffes. "I don't believe her," he said to himself. He quickly put the Africa book into his pack. He started down the ladder. When he stepped onto the ground, he looked around carefully. The giraffes were eating the tree leaves. The zebras were grazing in the grass. Tons of birds flapped overhead. This is okay, he thought. He just had one little question. Where are the lions? Oh, so that's the end of chapter 2, Jump, Beast, Jump. Let me just read the riddle one more time so maybe you can think about it and see if you could figure out the answer. I'm the color of gold and as sweet as can be, but beware of the danger that's all around me. What am I? So it's something that's gold, sweet, but there's a lot of danger around whatever it is. Okay, next time we meet, we'll read chapter 3 and 4.